I have a presence or a centeredness with my three daughters. There are three teenage daughters. They do go through tons of up and downs on a daily basis. And for me to truly be able to listen, be present, have that space with them, feel like I can allow myself space to just hear them out. At the end of the day, every day, even when I'm working, because I ended up getting a job, by the way.
Oh,
I did.
congratulations.
What'd you say?
I said
Thank
congratulations.
you,
That's
thank you.
great.
Yay.
And it was anyway, it's one of those where I'm like, gosh, am I ever gonna find something? Of course, it ends up being exactly in flow with everything else.
Great.
It just was wonderful. But again, I'm not done with my tidying festival yet. And like, so it's one of those where those things were truly, truly, truly happening and kicking in. But for me, I had to kind of like go, okay, that's great. These are all really great things, Diane, but you need to complete what you set out to do for yourself.
Welcome to Spark Joy, the podcast dedicated to celebrating the KonMari method and the transformative power of surrounding yourself with joy and letting go of all the rest. With your hosts and certified KonMari consultants, Kristyn Ivy and Karen Sochi. And now, here's the show.
Our guest today is Diane Arias. Diane is the first guest here at Spark Joy who is also a client. She's actively moving through the KonMari method towards a life of joy. And she was inspired by an article that I wrote about how you can execute your KonMari event marathon style. Diane had ran a marathon before, an actual marathon. And so she decided to move through the KonMari categories this in the same fashion, and she reached out to me for some inspiration. So I loved her dedication and enthusiasm from the beginning, and I've been following her progress ever since then, providing guidance and resources along the way. Diane is a stay-at-home mom who is married to her college sweetheart and lives in the suburbs in Northwest Indiana. After a decade of raising her three girls, one age 14 and two twin 13-year-olds, Diane found that her belongings, along with her home, looked run down and unloved. So using the KonMari method of tidying, she's giving her home a visual reset and creating a space that will take her family of five into the next phase of their life. She made the decision to use the KonMari method to bring life and love into her home and prepare her for a return to full-time work, which is on the horizon. Diane has had a KonMari summer, tidying for 2 to 3 hours at a time in her 3,000 square foot house. Diane has worked through many of the KonMari categories and is now focusing on her accumulated sentimental items, which she will peruse this evening over wine to celebrate her the end of her big KonMari push. Mm-hmm. So with that, welcome to Spark Joy, Diane.
Hello. I should have got my wine for the interview. Now that I'm thinking about it, though. Thank you.
You wouldn't mind.
Hello, Kristyn. Hi, Karen.
Hi. Well, before we jump into discussing your tidying progress, let's take a step way back. Can you remember the moment when you were first introduced to Marie Kondo or the life-changing magic of tidying up?
Yes. It was December of 2014 when I first came across the book. I'm very much someone who's always been into personal development. So I'm always looking, hunting, wanting to just continue to improve myself. And not only like professionally as a mom, as a person, spiritually, like that, I geek out on that stuff. So of course, when I saw her title, I'm drawing a blank now, Marie Kondo's book, but I saw it, I was like, oh, wow, like this is something that I'm going to want to know more about. So I bought the book and read it pretty quickly, but it was one of those where, okay, this is something that is truly going to put all that I know kind of on its head. So it's
Mhm.
like, so what I did was actually I said I want to put some of this into play at the time, again, 2014. So that's, I'm approaching 3 years ago. I was, not at, oh my gosh, I was not in a place where I could even wrap my head around tidying my whole home. I really like overwhelm was a big thing for me and really I almost say has always been, but I don't even feel that anymore. So it sounds strange for me to say that. But at the time, overwhelm was very much just my daily experience in life. And so what I did was I bite-sized it for myself and I said, okay, well, at least I'll just do clothes. So I did clothes over the winter. So and then from there I went, okay, I'm gonna just put this to the side until I feel like this is something this major overhaul can happen.
Mhm.
So that was my introduction to her method in her process. And I gave myself that taste. So I would just say, okay, yeah, this is definitely something I want to do. And I just need to have the timing show up for it.
Sure. I think
Right.
you mentioned you started uh, working through this with the intention of finishing it over like a week of time, just dedicating almost every hour of the day to it, right? But I
Yes.
think you in the end extended it some because you really wanted to be more thoughtful about it and not overwhelm yourself, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was, well, and it was naive.
Mm-hmm.
You're very sweet. You're avoiding that. And I really honestly, I wasn't going about it from an egotistical standpoint. It was like it was the first time, and that was why I was so full of joy when I first connected with you, Kristyn, was because that actually clicked in my head. Like I could get my head wrapped around this certain block of time. I could get my head wrapped around banging out a category,
Yeah.
every day. And I saw those really beautiful photos of cooperative children. And it was like, I was like, okay, there's, like this is something I really think I could do. But of course, like I had no idea how much stuff I actually owned.
Mm.
I could
Mm.
not believe it. I am not someone who would consider myself, knee deep in consumerism. I really am not the shopper in my marriage. I'm really not. I mean, I do, I know what I like to spend my money on, but it's not like I don't have a retail habit by any chance, by any means at all. I have always considered myself a thoughtful shopper,
Mhm.
but holy cow, I was like, where on earth and why on earth more? Why do I
Right.
have all this stuff and how much? And it's one of those where you're tempted to go, okay, you know what, category, you just all can go. I'm like, nope, I have to touch every single item. I have to process each item. I have to process the emotions attached to that or associated with that. And that's where I was like, that's where, the task expanded
Right.
exponentially, and that's okay. So
Well, that's the beauty
I,
of it, right? It's flexible
yes,
Exactly.
process and you made
yes,
it
yes, yes.
work for you and
I
yeah.
did. I did. And I'm kind of shaking my head too because I'm not shaking my head. I'm like kind of giggling to myself because the wisdom of Marie Kondo just continues to surface. And of course, you think, no, wait, it's not. No, there's no way it's going to take me. Yeah, well, she's in her position for a reason because she knows what she's
She's
talking
Marie Kondo
about.
for a reason. That's so funny.
Exactly, Karen. So
So
I was I was enlightened.
I was going to say that when you were speaking, it made me think that a lot of times I know that in my practice with clients, when they're struggling, I always remember to say something along the lines of, let's go back to your vision. Let's talk
Hmm.
about your vision. And we always want to emphasize the importance of being grounded by your vision throughout the entire tidying experience. It just makes things so much easier and helps to get kind of centered and back to the task. What what was your vision like? What did you want to accomplish by tidying? What was your initial vision of your ideal lifestyle and what did you foresee for yourself through this
Um,
process?
okay. So I would say that's twofold and it'll probably turn into threefold, but twofold. Mainly one thing is that when you become a mom, when I became a mom, when anybody like changes their life in that in fashion, like feel like there was a part of me that I wanted to reconnect with, to be honest. Like I ran a marathon. I was with my husband at the time, before becoming a mom, like a
Mhm.
good 15 years. Like I had this whole identity. And I thought I was kind of putting things in step as far as expanding my life experience because I made an intentional choice to become a mother. But I was like, oh my God, like there was, and really, of course, honestly, it was like my own joy for my own life is what was missing, but I couldn't put, you
Mhm.
can't put your finger on it if, you don't know what you don't know. So I was thinking like, so the vision that I had for myself, and it was a vision, a visual that included a very slim woman in a yoga, her own looking like her own personal yoga studio. But I'm not even someone who does yoga, which is hysterical. But but just like very stylish and well put together and eclectic and relaxed yet thoughtful, and just this wonderful combination of things in her physical space and truly going and connecting back because I did train and run a marathon before having children. And then, through the process of deciding to tidy my home, like I completed a second one. So I was kind of like wanting to like reconnect with that person. Like, and I feel like, and it's so cliche, like I got lost along the way, but it was one of
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
where I didn't lose my identity. I really truly like my joy, like the weight of motherhood, the weight of running a home, the weight of, I was putting all this on myself. And I'm like, you know what? Is life really going to be like this until they're out of the house? I'm like, I don't want
Mhm.
that. So that was one. And like, and or that's one was reconnecting with, I don't want to say my past self, but the joys that I had in the past, whatever that looks like. I'm like, there's juice in my life. There's lacking juice in my life that I truly definitely knew I had before having kids. So I'm like, please don't tell me that I have to give that up. I didn't believe it, but I was feeling that. I was like, that's definitely missing. So because
Right.
of that too, I'm my daughter's example. I'm their model.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, if you do choose to be, and I still like, I'm like, it's a choice. Like, truly do not feel any pressure from me on what your lifestyle is supposed to look like. But really, truly, it needs to be a life you enjoy.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
weight of that was really, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And so that was my vision that, I would reconnect in a way of how I felt about myself, the connection I had to my responsibilities in my home. And, and I'm laughing now because of like, I don't need to be as skinny as the person in that picture. I really don't care. But she seems to be really happy in her space.
It's more
Nice,
of a
nice.
feeling. I love that.
Yes, yes. I don't
Yeah.
really care. I'm like, I don't care really. So anyway, it's kind of funny because at the time, I'm sure that was part of it, but now I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't really matter as long as I'm healthy.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so anyway, that was it. That was twofold. So yeah, that I guess
So,
it is twofold.
Yeah.
so were there any moments when you really felt like you just wanted to give up on the whole thing? It sounds like, there were definitely some times when it was a little overwhelming and challenging.
Yes, I'm just not a quitter. So what I do know, and that's why I gave myself like 2 years before I like really knew that I was gonna do this because I really don't like to set out. I don't know how to set out and do things and let them go very well. Unless I'm like smacked in the head, I'm like, okay, I'm really not supposed to do this. So to answer your question, honestly, anytime I did feel overwhelmed and I did feel confronted like the enormity of this task because it is physically challenged, it's a physical task. It's like it isn't involved, the simplicity of it is there, but boy, there is physical work and energy that goes into something like this. So I just said, okay, Diane, like really honestly, is this something that's for you to do? Like, are you really supposed to do this? Or you feel like you're doing it to fit somebody else's expectations? Because I did have that connection with Kristen, but I'm like, no, no, this is really truly something I want to complete. And what's interesting is because I have trained and completed a marathon, I had my cute family at the end going, yay, yeah, wow, you're great, like thousands and hundreds of thousands of other people because it was a Chicago marathon. There's none of that. So it feels lonely. It does. And I've mentioned that in our, earlier discussion. It felt lonely, but what's interesting is I confronted my own loneliness and realized further in I got, the more my surroundings really truly were comforting me or supporting me, which was actually one of my intentions. Um, and as you mentioned it in my intro, like I wanted it to go from feeling like a house that was ragged and torn and looked like no one cared. And I was feeling that because I truly feel my home was a reflection of me. And I'm sure I was conveying that to people in my life, which I don't like at all. So then, too, a home that is full and vibrant and joyful and supporting, truly supporting me and supporting my family. And that's really the job of a house and a home anyway. And that I felt that that kicked in. I have to say that kicked in. Um, I would say August going into school starting and the girls are gone at school and I'm looking around like, wow, all this stuff is stuff I love. And it didn't feel lonely anymore. So,
Well, I love how you tie the marathon and health back to this tidying effort. I did run a marathon myself way back when, and I
okay.
completed one, and that was more than enough
I
for the rest of
understand.
my
I
life.
do.
It was a great experience, but one and done for me. But
It's awesome.
but yeah, so I think that
Yeah.
similar to when you're running a marathon, there's a point where you hit a wall a bit, and you
Uh-huh.
feel like you're so close to the end, but you feel like, oh gosh, can I make it?
Mm-hmm.
So in
Mm-hmm.
those moments, was there anything specifically that you did to kind of trigger yourself back into getting focused?
Oh gosh. Boy. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, all right. I'm just thinking back when it was really hard was July. What is with July? Especially in the Midwest. Um, is that what I did was, and this is something that's funny, like I talk about it and you mentioned it earlier, is like having the wine. Like I realized that I was kind of like holding myself, holding a stick over my head through all this process. Like, you just got to get done. You just got to get it done, and it's got to get done. And that comes from like, I used to do print design. So I was like, everything I did was
Mm.
deadline oriented. And so, okay, well, that's one way to accomplish stuff. But what I realized was I set up a reward system for myself. And the reward could literally
Mm.
be like, it didn't have to be food. It could be, you know what? I get to go out and I'm just going to walk around the block. But I'm not going to walk around the block, which I know I would enjoy, but I'm going to do it once I get through this tidying. And that doesn't mean I hopped up and went right to my category, but I'm like, okay, I'm looking at the watch, I'm puttering around because there's so many things to putter around with, right? For a
Right.
good 15, 20, I'm a good
Hmm.
15, 20 minutes of puttering before I can get myself to confront a category. It's just how I am. And I'm the same way with like anything, like I just need a good warm up. I just do. I have a tough time switching gears. So that reward I set up for myself, and I just, every time I got stuck, because of course it happened, because how many subcategories do you have in kimono? My gosh, like
Right.
seriously, like why
Yes.
so much stuff? So anyway, so I'm like, no. And so it took like, it felt awkward because I was not in the habit of rewarding myself. I'm a mom. I take care of everybody else's needs. I put myself last, even though I'm not supposed to. It's what I do. And, but I'm like, wait a second, I have to like bribe myself or else, I'm going to look and 2 or 3 weeks have passed and that would really bum me
Mm-hmm.
out. That would really bum me out. So that's what I did. So, and it didn't have to be, or even just like, hey, normally I have 2 cups of coffee. You can have another 2 cups of coffee. But get through this category. I'm like, oh God, I'm getting extra coffee today. I mean, just it
That's
doesn't,
great.
it didn't have to be big.
Yeah.
It just, and two, that's a way of like me really knowing how I tick, which, apparently I really wasn't that great at. So I've gotten a lot better. So that's what I did. I definitely, and that was definitely my go-to was a reward system, of going, no, we really need to create and maintain some sort of positive momentum associated with this. Because I tell you, I felt it every single time I lost that momentum, was literally feeling like picking it all back up again. I'm like, okay, that was another, I'm like, okay, I know what that feels like too when you lose that steam or that momentum. So anyway, so those were the two things, but definitely a little reward system, a little personal reward system that no one else knows. And you just, keep yourself moving.
Yeah.
So what aspect of your life would you say has already begun to change now that you've progressed through the KonMari tidying process?
Okay. I felt like one of the things I wanted to share with both of you was I feel like the book needs to come with like a warning because once you start making these major shifts of unloading all these, belongings, like things start clicking in your life. But you still have to and that feels really good. I'm like, wow, this is like just little things like because I made the choice too as part of my tidying marathon was that I wanted to basically restyle my whole home, which is quite the task, right? But I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to accomplish this, but that's what I want. And let's see on the other end of 2017 what that looks like, right? So my husband ended up with like 2 or 3 hallway bonuses. So I got 2 or 3, I got 2 new light fixtures. I had like things were clicking, right? I'm like, oh my God, my restyled home's showing up. My restyled home's showing up. This is awesome. Like I'm on Overstock buying really expensive fixtures. It's good stuff, right? I'm like, no, but I have to finish. So that was so all that those good things were happening because I was creating that positive momentum. But I definitely was like, oh gosh, don't have too much fun at the party. You got to get back, got to get back to the work. So that was one thing. Like things were definitely, we use the word manifest or, that magic was definitely showing up for me. I was like, holy freaking cow. Because if I would have ever said, okay, I want to buy this light fixture. This is how much it's going to cost. And it would have never happened, like ever. It wouldn't have. It would have dropped very low on the, priority list as usual. But this happened. So that was 1. And 2, honestly, oh my gosh. I have a presence or a centeredness with my 3 daughters. There are 3 teenage daughters. They do go through tons of up and downs on a daily basis. And for me to truly be able to listen, be present, have that space with them, feel like I can allow myself space to just hear them out. At the end of the day, every day, even when I'm working, because I ended up getting a job, by the way.
Oh,
I
congratulations.
did. What'd you say?
I said congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yay.
And it was anyway, it's one of those where I'm like, gosh, am I ever going to find something? Of course, it ends up being exactly in flow with everything else.
Great.
It just was wonderful. But again, I'm not done with my tidying festival yet. And so it's one of those where those things were truly, truly, truly happening and kicking in. But for me, I had to kind of like go, okay, that's great. These are all really great things, Diane, but you need to complete what you've set out to do for yourself. So that was a bit of a struggle because, I just want to, join the party and say, I did it. Yay. It's like, no, we're not quite there yet. So, but yeah, no, it's one of those things where I would not be able to put into words what it is that I was wanting to be for my children at this age, but I have found it through this method. So
that's awesome. I love how intentional you are about completing the process, right?
Yes.
You don't let that false sense of accomplishment allow you to say, oh, I'll put off sentimental for later.
Very tempting.
So, yeah.
I was like, because of course, I was dreaming up ways of like, oh, I should be doing this with my husband. And I was dreaming up of a date, because this is what we do as women is like, we dream up these like scenarios where our husband will participate fully in them, but we know they won't. It sounds wonderful at the time. So anyway, I'm like, no, Diane, you just gotta keep, you just keep moving through. And
Right.
so anyway, yeah, no,
Yeah, I want to hear more about your family and how they've supported you. I know
okay.
this tidying can be a little bit disruptive, so they probably are like, "What is mom
Oh my
doing?" Right
gosh.
at
Okay.
first.
So I joked with you, and I'll say it again, like, do not let that cute family photo fool you. They all look so sweet and loving, but at their best, they are. But here is the thing. So, how they supported me was basically I realized if I spent time trying to explain to everybody what it was I was doing and get this kind of buy-in, that I barely had an understanding of what my undertaking was. So it was kind of like
Hmm.
very similar again to choosing to train for the Chicago Marathon year
Mm-hmm.
prior. But that kind of helped me because it makes sense to nobody that you personally are making yourself go through intentional pain for distance running. So
Yeah.
so
Right.
I was able to kind of like just kind of tie it to that a little bit, but I really truly I just jumped in. I jumped in and I have to say, and that's why I was joking. Um I have to say, and that's why anchoring myself in intention was so important because I got really bad pushback. I really did because it didn't fit into anybody else's schedule or flow of things. All I was doing was making messes. They had no clue why, or the first thing was fear. They think I'm going to come after their stuff, even though they
Yeah.
know, like, we've
Right.
tidied together in the past, but they could tell, like, oh my gosh, mom's serious. So, we're not sure what's going to happen. So that to me, and that was a lesson that I pulled because I knew how hard that was going to be for me. Was to truly only focus on my own stuff. And what a mom has to do, and or even someone who's partnered with somebody, you truly have to detangle yourself from someone else's
Mm-hmm.
belongings. And I
Mm-hmm.
did not realize, like, seriously, I was like, whoa, I worry, think about, process, um, uh, dream up ways of it being better about my husband's belongings. And that's not it. And I knew in my head, like, yeah, I guess I'm kind of bad at that. And honestly, I'm not a nag, of course, but I really thought I was really good with boundaries until I was challenged by Marie Kondo's method to, no, only your stuff. And you're like,
Interesting.
so I have to ignore these giant messes that I look at and deal with. I just look at them. I don't have the job of dealing with them, but I tell myself I have the job of dealing with them, right?
Yeah.
You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Hmm.
Every stinking day. And I'm like, whoa. So that was a big one of saying, go, I've plugged myself in to every single person's belongings in this house, meanwhile, not really taking care of my own. And that was hard. So, really, as far as support, there really wasn't any support because it wasn't their journey. They're
Mm-hmm.
living their lives, they're facing the challenges in their lives. My husband has a very, very demanding job. It has been like, this has been one of the hardest years for him. He's been with the company 15 years. So, it's just this is truly something that I like had my own little, personal spiritual journey while everybody else in the whirlwind was continuing their lives. And
Right.
but their level of tolerance for giant messes was much better than I thought.
That's so great.
Thank you. Because I really was not good at doing one subcategory at a time. I didn't have the patience. So
Mm-hmm.
I took advantage of having a large downstairs and I really allowed myself to take it over for a good week and a half.
And I think I think you really described kind of making the method work for you.
Yeah.
And, again, I do think it's so difficult to kind of go through the process when other people in our homes are not on board
Hmm.
or who may even be actively, pushing against it. Maybe
Hmm.
not with any kind of intentional, like, but it's just because when things change, people get nervous. And so
Correct.
when mom is doing something different all of a sudden,
Hmm.
than other people in the family, there's a tendency, I think, to feel like maybe not threatened, but a little bit like unsteady. So it sounds like you really did a great job of just kind of maintaining your own intention, but yet being very respectful of what your family was also going through.
I tried. I tried very hard. So
it's a challenge. That's very challenging. Yes. So, but now that you have gone through a lot of that process, what kind of advice would you have for busy moms who are also trying to KonMari their home in the same way that you've been doing?
Okay, so the one thing is, and I think I'm going to go back to what I just shared. Really, the advice is the expectation of those around you. You love them, you're investing in each other's lives, you like, oh my gosh, like, however, this is truly like the first question I had to ask this twice, if not three times, okay, by people in my life. Of course, there's interest and intrigue and, oh, I'm going to try and this and that and the other. And then they put her out, right? Because, there was, anyway. So it's one of those where the hardest part is you're facing you. You're facing you. You're facing you. You're facing yourself. And it is, oh gosh, it's one of those where it has nothing to do with anybody else. And the first question I got asked by those two or three women was, what'd your husband say, or what'd your kids say? I'm like, it has nothing to do with them. It truly has nothing to do with them. And that's the hardest part, because our heads are entrenched in everybody's lives around us. And honestly, I keep saying moms, but it's women in general, because we sure. Connect and we invest but we are truly entrenched. And really what's funny is that I think is what's so revolutionary about her method is that she's saying, oh no, just you.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, whoa, wait. No, I have everybody else figured out, but like, no, just you, which is truly, I mean, that really is it's scary. It really is scary. And what's funny is, even Mother Teresa, she's like, if you are facing yourself and facing the truth of yourself, you are facing God. You are that is the task we are given by being individuals in this world, is that you truly only can do what you can do for your, so that's my tip, which is when you're wanting something, you really, truly, you are the one that's in control and you can do it. It's just setting yourself up to know what you're getting yourself into, and you really shouldn't involve them other than to say, hey, heads up. That's all I did. There wasn't really I don't have the dynamic of like a group buy-in on stuff. It's not. So I don't know if that really helps, but that was my experience of just diving in.
Right.
Sure.
So.
I'm curious if any of your kids or your husband maybe came around, further down the process once you got further along and things were a little less messy and the dust settled.
My poor husband, honestly, I thought about this too. If it was any other year, because he doesn't have, like, you need headspace in order to do this, and he hasn't had the headspace because of how demanding things have been. But he did have a moment, and it was like a flicker. And I was like, really? He goes, because he goes, you know what? I probably really do need to tidy all these T-shirts. And
there you go.
He just used the word tidy.
Yeah.
But it was one of those where, and this is a good lesson for me too, ladies, by the way, is that in being in partnership with him, I've been with him 25 years, and I have just been used to his machismo. He is Mexican, but now I'm like, no, I need to be more in tune and better at really picking up on those cues when he is ready to kind of, go outside of what his norm is, and be receptive to that. And that is on me. And I was like, okay, he was ready to do something, but okay, well, but of course my head was full on in my tidying. You see what I'm saying? So in order for him to pick up on it, because she used the metaphor of in my wake, I have to be open and receptive to that, which I really wasn't. I was really, because I'm headstrong like that. I really am. So, but I do see it in our future, because I even just in today, I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, so it's in our what's the word? In our dialogue. It's now in
Mhm.
our in the words that we use, and it is a method that everybody knows and is familiar with.
Sure.
And so I see it evolving as opposed to like these pops of inspiration, which is okay, because that is, again, like just, a dynamic between partners. Because I
Right.
really think probably my guess would be like this time next year, he probably will have his, clothes and closet and everything tidied in one shape or another. Um, but it'll, like I said, with everything else, it'll come in its own time.
Right.
Right.
So that's one. And two, this is one of my favorite stories, because my kids right now, for the most part, are kind of slobby still. But Sydney and Aisha, they're my twins. When I first started the tidying, like I was like, I have to do a something. So I had them and I involved them, and they pulled up the YouTube folding lessons.
Hmm.
And
Uh-huh.
they actually, because they're so hungry for knowledge, and me, still in overwhelm, I couldn't process new knowledge because I was in overwhelm. So I had them teach me.
Nice.
And that was when I did my quick close in 2014, just so I could say, what is this? Okay, now I know what it is. And I don't know when I would, do the tidying full marathon, which I did obviously. But even just, it probably was like a month ago where, I'm standing in the doorway, I'm staring at a giant mess, and I'm like looking at them, and they're like, yeah, we know we need to tidy. I didn't even just say anything. So it's like, oh gosh, I'm like, yay! So it just takes a little bit of investment. But it's one of those where I still have to be a parent. It's magic, but it doesn't do your parenting for you, unfortunately. So
You mean things aren't just flying back into place in your home?
I know, right? Yeah, and we're slacking on
Not
the
that kind of
folding.
magic?
Yeah, and too, as far as technique with folding the clothes, like I told myself too, so I could manage expectations,
Sure.
because I tend to have like a strong perfectionism tendency. I told myself, I'm like, I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna do like a B minus on my folding, because I knew I wasn't going to instantly master it. And if I told myself I had to instantly master it, my interest in it was going to fly out the window. So
Right.
I see myself now going, wait a second, because, one of my daughters, Sydney, she's usually in charge of laundry. And like, we are getting really slack on our KonMari folding method. It's fine, Mom. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So I'm like, okay. But of course, because I'm working now, it gets put away, and I'm like accepting, the fact that these poor t-shirts are really not getting love right now, but it's not a priority at the moment. So then I
That's
go
so good.
back and I just did a full set of laundry on Thursday because my washing machine happened to die on me last week. So I go and I do them all, and I bring them home, and they feel so good. And in the past that I'd done something like that, it would have been like, oh yeah, that perfectionist in me would be like, see, this is the right way. But that's not what it connected with. It connected with these t-shirts look like someone cares. These
Oh,
t-shirts
that's
look
so
like
great.
they want to go in their home in the drawer. You know
Right.
what I mean,
Hmm.
right? As opposed to a 13-year-old that didn't really want to do laundry, kind of folded them, and then they're kind of crammed, and then we're going to put away. And that's okay, because I'm the mom, she's the daughter, you know what I mean? That's how that works. So
Right.
that, like, oh my gosh, those moments, like, I'm like, this is why. Because of course I have that little fear in the back of my head that I'm gonna, are we gonna backpedal? Because I have lost and gained weight like 3 times, and I'm like, is this gonna be like, weight loss? But absolutely not, because it's truly like it's showing up in my home, in these beautiful ways that I'm like, oh no, we definitely want more of this, of that feeling of items being taken care of and having their place in their home, not because they're supposed to, because that comes from your
Right.
head, right?
Yeah.
But because they want to be there. That's their home. You've given them their home. You've spent a moment in saying, this is where, or, going, oh, wait a second, they don't feel very, happy there. Let's foot here. And then once truly click point, truly feeling the click point, truly feeling the click point, this is where they want to be. This is where they feel comfortable. Um, and we're talking about our possessions.
Yeah, and that's super powerful. And
yes,
now that it's part of your life, if your kids eventually have want to revisit folding or want to revisit it in other aspects of or other categories, or your husband starts it down the line, like you have that approach in your back pocket that you could always return to, because you have spent, a tremendous amount of time really focusing in on this and being intentional about your event. So bravo, Diane.
Absolutely.
Bravo.
Thank you. I do have to share one thing, okay? So the big hurdle for me was, and I'm sorry if I'm taking one of your questions away from you, but the biggest hurdle was the kitchen, the shared space of our kitchen. And not really wanting, but knowing I was going to step into some right fighting. And I really am not someone who fights. I do not like conflict at all, but we would have uncomfortable moments. That's what my fighting looks like. It just feels uncomfortable. And then we kind of get past it somehow. I don't know. But we usually talk through things, but I just do not like those moments. But I knew I'm asking for them by moving our belongings in our home. And also the shared space of the garage. So, and those were both done in the summer months. And so the kitchen, this was when I had to listen to my belongings, and I'm the one who cooks the bulk of the time too. So I'm like, no, these are truly mostly mine, but I found, and I could tell, like, oh my gosh, this is where the appliances want to be. This is where the glassware wants to be. This is where it makes the most sense for our utensils to be nearest to the table, like knives, forks, spoons, our hot pads for when we put hot things on our table. I love we have a farm style table that I love. It's so big, and it's bigger than the space it should, but we love it. I don't care. And so, have that close to the table. And that, like, once I made that shift and moved those things there, and the things that were in the drawer there was our hodgepodge electronics drawer, which was like a major house shame, like shared house shame, was that stupid electronics drawer, because it was, no one, it was just a hot mess. It was just a hot mess. And it had no business being in my kitchen. It didn't need to be there. So anyway, once I started making those changes, where's this? Where's that? Well, once I finished tidying the kitchen, and before that, I did ask for feedback, I think, or input, but it was mostly ignored, not because they don't like me or love me. It's just, they don't, at the moment, they don't care where these things go until they can't find them. Right?
Of course.
So the biggest challenge has been where our pots and pans go. I have them near the stove. And we've had a couple mishaps, like they're fighting it, that they don't like it there. So my husband just got hit by, the top of a lid. I'm like, it doesn't go there. Well, I'm the one that caused confusion by moving things. But I have to say that was like the worst of it. Like, because everything else, like going through the garage is happier. We get to pull a car in there, it's all good. But anyway, that was the only thing, like, and I don't know if it's possible to do what I've done without those uncomfortable moments. I think it's impossible. Or if you have a client that does it without that, have them on your show. So anyway, that was you have to do both sides of the coin. So anyway, that was the one thing that, I wish it didn't have to be that way, where things are kind of uncomfortable, but totally worth it. Totally worth it.
Yeah. And we have some great pictures that you've sent us of your progress, and you've done a great job of sharing your experience with those on your Instagram. So we will make sure to include that in the show notes, and also on the Spark Joy Podcast Instagram account as well, so that all the listeners can see your beautiful family cooking in the kitchen. I love that picture where there's like no clutter, just the things you're actively working with to make the meal, and you're sharing a moment together. It's just beautiful.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, unprompted, spontaneous. So.
Well, I know we're standing between you and your wine celebration.
Right?
So besides the last category, sentimental, that you're going to work on this evening, and the fact that you're going to have a little celebration, what is sparking the most joy currently in your life today?
Okay. I would have to say just having headspace. Having headspace in what my day is, what I need to do in my day, and having a true full presence for my daughters. And not honestly, I had a small little fear with bringing in, work into my life and how that will play in. And I have a handle on things. And honestly, Overwhelm has just been, oh God, at my feet for I can't tell how many years in my home and being, in charge of three young ladies, but just truly being able to just be their mom and the kind of mom I thought I would want to be. And that's one that can relax and just know that when we're gonna sit and watch a couple Gilmore Girls, that I can relax and not worry about everything else that's not getting done. Just clear headspace and being fully present for each child.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
great.
Well,
Yes.
thank you so much, Diane, for joining us
You're
here at Spark
welcome.
Joy. So happy to get your take on an experience when it comes to executing your tidying event marathon style. Thank you so much.
Yes. You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. You can follow the final stages of Diane's tidying journey by connecting with her on her Instagram at Diane Arias 2017. I should say Diane_Arias_2017.
So now we want to hear from you. Tell us your burning tidying questions or share stories about how KonMari has impacted your life.
You can find us at sparkjoypodcast.com and click Ask SparkJoy to leave a question or comment for a chance to be featured on next week's show. You can also join the discussion on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the handle @SparkJoyPodcast.
Thanks for tuning in, and we hope your day sparks joy.
Thank you for listening to Spark Joy with your host, Kristyn Ivy of For the Love of Tidy in Chicago and Karen Sochi of the Serene Home in New York City. Spark Joy, the podcast, is not endorsed by or affiliated with KonMari Media Incorporated. The opinions expressed on this episode represent the views of the co-hosts and guests alone and do not represent the corporate position of KonMari Media Incorporated or the KonMari consultant community.